One of the most asked questions on the internet right now regarding addiction is simply, am I addicted? Or how do I know if I'm addicted? Well, if you're asking, in the dark, if something has you by the throat, if that question keeps returning like a hand around a note, if you whisper, do I need this? When the room is cold and still, then the answer may be rising from a deeper buried will. People do not ask for nothing. What they fear may be the case, not unless they've felt a shadow moving closer in its place, not unless what once was chosen now feels heavier than choice, not unless they hear dependence growing louder in their voice. Maybe once it felt like comfort, maybe once it felt like peace, maybe once it numbed the noise and gave your spinning mind release. Maybe once it seemed like medicine for wounds you could not name, but now it leaves you emptier and somehow wanting just the same. Maybe once it was a doorway you could walk through and return. Now it feels more like a furnace, and you are the thing that burns. Now the edge you tried to soften is no longer why you start. Now it's simply what you run to when you cannot face your heart. That is where the line gets darker. That is where the truth grows teeth. When the thing you used for shelter starts to feed on you beneath. When it's not about enjoyment, not about a little fun, but about the aching panic that arrives when it is gone. If you say, I can stop anytime, then why not stop tonight? Why the bargain with tomorrow? Why the flinch from honest light? Why the private negotiations before you have even tried? Why the need to set a future date and keep the truth aside? Why next week? And why after this? And why one last time again? Why the rules you keep creating just to watch them bend and bend? Why the language of delay when freedom should not fear the test? Why does quitting feel like dying when you tell yourself it's rest? If the thought of laying it down makes your chest begin to squeeze, if your mind begins defending it before you disagree, if a simple pause feels threatening, if restraint feels like a war, then it may not be a pastime standing harmless at your door. If you hide how much you use it, how you do it, when or why, if you clean up all the evidence before someone walks nearby, if you edit every detail so your image stays intact, then the truth is likely darker than the version in your act. If you clear the history quickly, if you bury what you bought, if you count on no one seeing where your private habits brought, if you tell yourself it's nothing while protecting it with shame, then your soul may already know it, even if you fear the name. People free do not need cover for the things they calmly choose. They do not build careful stories so the facts can be confused. They do not live in quiet terror of exposure or of proof. They do not guard a secret hunger underneath a decent roof. And maybe you are functioning. Maybe outwardly you stand. Maybe you work and answer texts and do what life demands. Maybe all the bills are paid, and maybe no one sees the slide. But some prisons are constructed where no witness lives inside. Functioning is not the same thing as a free and steady soul. You can keep a life together while the darkness takes its toll. Some addictions do not wreck you in one bright and public blaze. They just slowly steal your center in 100 hidden ways. A little peace gets shaved away, a little honesty grows thin, a little sleep, a little trust, a little will to fight within. A little dignity goes missing, then some self-respect, then more, till you barely know the person looking back behind the door. Ask yourself the harder question when you reach for it, what for? Is it pleasure or escape hatch or a lock upon a door? Do you run to it when lonely, when rejected, when ashamed? Do you run to it in boredom when upraised or unnamed? Do you need it when you're anxious, when you're restless, when you're low? Do you need it when you're happy, just to keep the good things close? Is it grown into your answer every time you feel too much? Then it is no longer casual. It is learned, your every touch. Once a thing becomes your method for surviving every mood, once it turns into your language for what pain has always brewed, once it sits upon the throne where truth and courage ought to be, then the thing is not your servant, it's shaping what you see. And masters always ask for payment. This is how their kingdoms stand. Maybe payment comes in dollars slipping right through open hands. Maybe payment comes in distance growing cold in someone's eyes. Maybe payment comes in mornings full of dread and compromise. Maybe payment comes in focus shredded thin by constant need. Maybe payment comes in appetite for actual life receding. Maybe payment comes in numbness where no sunlight finally lands. Maybe payment comes in being unable just to sit and stand. And maybe this no longer feels the way it used to feel. Maybe what once gave excitement now just keeps the panic still. Maybe pleasure left the building, but the pattern never did. Maybe now you chase relief the way a starving child would live. That matters more than almost anything, so do not brush it by. When the thrill is gone, but you return, there is a deeper reason why. Addiction is not fed by joy as much as fear and empty need. It survives on desperation and the false relief you plead. It is not that you are wicked. It is not that you are trash. It is not that you are hopeless, weak, pathetic, built to crash. It may be that you are hurting in a way you've never named, and this thing became the place you went to medicate the pain. Maybe old shame built the chamber. Maybe grief became the lock. Maybe fear sat in your bloodstream like a slow and ticking clock. Maybe loneliness grew massive in the corners of your chest, and this thing became the one place where your mind could briefly rest. Maybe trauma never healed right. Maybe rage was swallowed whole. Maybe you have spent your lifetime trying not to lose control. Maybe this became your answer, filthy bandage, rusted chain, something that could stop the bleeding while it drove you half insane. This is why so many people stay so long inside the snare, not because they love the bondage, but because there's real pain there. Because the cage was built around them while it claimed to be a shield. And by the time they saw the bars, they had forgotten how to yield. But pain explains it partly. Pain does not make bondage safe. Wounds may tell you how you got there, but they do not bless the place. And if you know this thing is costing more than you can keep on paying, then truth is not your enemy, though it may feel unforgiving. You do not need some grand collapse to justify the fear you feel. You do not need to lose it all before admitting that this is real. Rock bottom is not one event with sirens, headlights, blood, or cuffs. Sometimes it is realizing you no longer trust yourself enough. Sometimes it is seeing clearly you live two lives, not one, but two. One for everyone around you, one for what you crawl back to. Sometimes it is just one sentence, spoken plain without disguise. I do not like who I'm becoming when I look into my eyes. And that sentence is enough. You do not need a worse excuse. Wisdom says to stop the bleeding while there's still something to lose. There is courage in the maybe. There is courage in the doubt. There is courage when the truth begins to push the poison out. Tell somebody who won't flatter you or help you hide the cost. Someone who can stand in truth when your own bearings have been lost. Tell a friend, a sponsor, pastor, therapist, a room, a guide. Tell a doctor, tell your family, let the secret step outside. Help is not humiliation. Help is not some branded scar. Help is what begins the moment that you stop pretending it's hard. Help is structure. Help is honesty. Help is hands when you are weak. Help is someone you can hear the truth you have been scared to speak. The first days may feel brutal, like your nerves have all been skinned, like the dark is in your bloodstream and is crawling from within. But cravings are not prophets, though they thunder, beg, and lie. They are waves that break and weaken, even when they feel sky high. Healing is not clean or pretty. It is grit and sweat and truth. It is reaching when you're shaking. It is grieving. It is proof that a person can be fractured and still fight to rise again, that a soul can walk through fire and not belong to it in the end. So if you're asking whether this has grown too large in you, do not smother that suspicion just because it scares you through. That question may be mercy. That question may be your way out. That question may be the last clean place still speaking through the doubt. If you're asking, then be honest. If you're honest, then get help. Do not leave yourself alone there with the war inside yourself. You are not beyond recovery. You are not beyond the light. But if something has you chained, then call it chained and start the fight.